Welcome back to The Thing with No Name, part 2 of the interview with the nerd and the Canadian. Part 1 could not have gone any better. Phenomenal success. Well, in full transparency, I have absolutely no idea. We recorded this all on the same day, so I don't know how part 1 went. But hey, let's just assume it skyrocketed The Thing with No Name into number 1 on the podcast charts. I think it's safe to assume though, right? Yeah? But let's jump right back into it. Here we are with part 2 of The Thing with No Name. Joining us again on video is the nerd and the Canadian. So far, we've been answering some of the league questions, with a few of my own that I've sprinkled in there, and we're getting to hear your answers as professional out-of-the-box insiders. Some people in our league had no idea that we even had insiders. Now they do. But let's jump off the deep end straight away and go to a question from our league commish, Paul. He wants to know, which trade was the best trade that you've ever made? Which was the worst? Now, I'll change that up a bit and ask, which is the best trade that you, as out-of-the-box insiders, witnessed this year, and which was the worst? Canadian, let's start with you. Which one was the worst? Just to get this out of the way, of course, this is what the inside of an igloo looks like. No one can tell me different because guess what? I'm assuming you've never been in an igloo. I have. This is what it looks like. But to answer your question, easiest answer ever. 6 months ago in the offseason, 49ers got T. Higgins from the Saints. Straight up for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Looking back at that trade, Joe got away with murder. Olaf is probably kicking himself for that trade. Tell ya, you never trust a guy named Clyde. That's the name of someone who either steals $5 out of your truck's glove compartment or someone who stinks at fantasy football. Olaf, you should have saw the signs. What do you do in trading for a guy named Clyde? That's on you, fella. That kind of feels like a generalization, but you're not wrong. That trade looks quite lopsided now when you look at the stats for both players. But the best trade I've seen may surprise you. It's a recent one in the AFC. Ron and his Broncos traded defensive back, L'Jarius Sneed, for the now starting running back of the Miami Dolphins in Jeff Wilson. It's so difficult to get a productive running back, given that there are 16 teams in each of the AFC and the NFC. So to get one straight up for an IDP player is extremely rare. If only Ron decided to sign him for only $1. Great insight, guys. And hey, speaking of trades, Travis wants to know who's your favorite and least favorite team to trade with. Now, based off of what you two have seen in both leagues, because you guys have some pretty in-depth circles within the leagues itself, who would you say is the best team to trade with and the worst team to trade with? Let's start with you, nerd. The best team to trade with clearly seems like it's the Jets. Bill, he has a toss-out 100 trade offer and see what sticks type of mentality, which always leads to exciting conversation and blockbuster deals. Bill has an open door policy when it comes to trade talks, and he's available to trade any time of the year too, which means that trade talks can continue to happen year-round if you're interested. I don't want to be mean, but statistically, the worst team to trade with is the Dolphins, right? Richard doesn't trade with any other team other than the Bengals, and from what I know, he doesn't respond to most messages, at least from what I've been told. Good hot sauce, though. My mom uses it in her cooking all the time. I don't want to be mean. Wah, wah, wah. Grow a pair and tell it how it is. Buddy takes all the blame off himself by starting a sentence with, statistically, this is why I'm going to be mean if I really have to be. Shut up and just say how it is. The best team to trade with, Raiders and the Seahawks, hands down. Johnny Boy always responds, tells it how it is, doesn't try to be cryptic in his messages, doesn't send ridiculous offers, and just makes it easy to know if a deal can be done or if you just get the fuck out of the convo. It's efficient and I respect it. By far the best owner to talk trades with. The worst teams to talk trades with are the Ravens and the Colts. Surprise, buds! Allen and Tanner both love talking trades, but always second guess their decisions during the final part of the trade talks. I just don't have time for it. Get it together, boys. Also, does Aaron and Matthew even know that they've been in this league from the very beginning? I don't remember the last time I've heard of their Rams and Eagles teams responding to any trade talks. Hey, nerd, that's how you do it. I just gave 4 answers that pissed some people off when I really only had to give 1. And I didn't hide behind statistically. Okay, shots fired. And being the host of the show, I fully encourage everyone to sound off in the comment section, whether you agree or disagree with them. Let's hear your opinions, or air out your grievances with the Canadian, since he seems to definitely deserve it. Speaking of airing out your grievances, let's get to that next question, and it's a doozy. What teams would you say are the biggest frauds in each league based on the standings? Let's start with you, Canadian. The fucking Steelers, eh? I already gave Chris some praise, but let's take him down a peg and bring him here with the rest of us. Hey, buddy, how lucky can you be having the second best record in the AFC, but have 8 other teams score more points than you so far this season? Holy shit. Chris must have stole the Colts logo and shoved that horseshoe right up his arse. Danny, you're not going to like this, but it's your Bucs team. And you can argue the point that your Browns team can fit into this category too. Statistically. What are you talking about? My Browns team is 11-0 and on pace to score more points than anyone else has ever had in the regular season of our league. Ever. We have what, like an average of 185 points per game? How can you call the Browns a fraudulent team? I expect this from the Canadian, but I did not expect this from you. This just sounds personal. Ha! That's what I'm talking about. Screw you, Danny. Get off your condescending podcast host high horse thinking you know fucking everything. Get him, nerd. Well, similar to the Canadians' point with the Steelers, Danny, your Bucs are in a similar situation. You're currently in the playoffs with the 3rd best record, but you only score 145 points per game, which is 10th in the NFC. And your Browns team is great, and Allen has discussed in his weekly updates, the team is a wagon, but you only average less than 133 points against your team each game. Let's see how you do in the playoffs against good teams when you actually have to worry about who you're starting in your lineup. Hopefully you don't choke under the pressure. Also, shout out to those AFC weekly updates from Allen. Always a must read. I get a lot of my information from that. I gotta say, I didn't expect to be taking so many shots from you two when I set up this interview. Well, all right. That being said, Jonathan wants to know when you think the Browns will lose their first game. This definitely doesn't sound like it's a question I want to hear the answer to, but have at her. I'd say in the semifinals when you actually have to make some tough lineup decisions. Sorry. Sounds like you should have already lost, Kimber. And nerd, don't say sorry. We've trademarked that word here in the Great White North. Great. Let's just move on to the last few questions. Who do you guys think has been the biggest disappointment in fantasy this season? I'm going bold, and I'm saying Jamar Chase. I'm sure John's Jaguars and Ron's Commanders will agree with me since they had to deal with him for the most of the season. You got to start him when he's playing. But can you trust that hip? I don't think so. That's a joint that only old people hurt, right? But even when he did play, was he boom or bust? I think so. Nothing in between. Nerd, get the stats for me because I know I'm right on this. I just don't have them in front of me.
Well, it depends what you consider to be boom or bust. Chase had 3 games with more than 30 points and 4 games with less than 14 points before getting hurt. So I guess, unfortunately, I would have to agree with the Canadian. I also think we have to look at some players like Michael Gallup on the Giants and the Broncos, who we all had high hopes for once he came back from injury. Same with Elijah Moore on the Packers and on the Ravens. I don't think anyone expected him to fall off the way that he did after his rookie season. Okay, interesting answers there. This is the question that I'm very interested to hear what you guys have to say. Who do you think has had the best strategic season so far? Nerd? I think it's Travis and the Chiefs. Look, he's had some terrible luck with Brees Hall on the practice squad, but I think that he still is the front runner to get that 101 draft pick in the AFC. His record is 3-8, so it's expected he'll finish in the bottom 4 when the regular season's all completed. And I think that he has the best chance out of the projected bottom 4 to do well in the consolation bracket. He already has players like Etienne, Sutton, McLaurin, Christian Kirk, all in the starting lineup, and he'll be getting Deshaun Watson back once the playoffs start. And if he plays, he'll be able to give him a boost to increase his odds even more. Great roster maneuvering all year from Travis, honestly.
Easy answer. It's Tanner and the Colts. Hands fucking down. Buddy took his team and said, it's good, but I want it to be better. So he took his best players and traded them for a bunch of future draft picks. Now he owns half the draft for the next few years. And it's even better because he also pissed some people off in the process. Don't hate the player or the game, boys. Just get over it and give credit when credit's due. Tanner did what most people wouldn't, and he set up his Colts team for sustained success.
Hey, Nerd, I think you're right. If Travis happened to have everything go the way that he planned to go, he had a perfect strategy to get the number 1 overall pick this year. Brees Hall didn't have to start him ever. He was on the practice squad the entire time. He could throw him in the lineup and sign him once the consolation bracket started. It would have been a perfect plan. And hey, it still might work out. It was so well planned out that even with the biggest piece not being in the mix anymore, he still might get it done. And you're right. No one should be blaming Tanner for having so many picks. It's challenging to all of a sudden just take your team that could potentially contend and say, let's scrap it, let's rebuild, let's just get a bunch of future picks and move forward. So he sold his pieces, and who knows, maybe they double in value because he asked for future considerations, basically. So hats off to Tanner. It was phenomenal seeing what he did. I want to thank both of you for joining me on this episode of The Thing with No Name. You've given great insight into the league that I'm sure everyone will appreciate. I hope all of you comment in the comment section below, disagreeing, agreeing, whatever. But I have one final question before we get you two out of here. Who is your out-of-the-box Super Bowl prediction and league winner for this season? Nerd? Thank you as well. This was a blast. I hope to do it again soon. I think we're going to have a surprise winner this year. I project that the Chargers will beat the Cowboys in the out-of-the-box Super Bowl on the back of rookie sensation Kenneth Walker III.
It took you long enough to get us on because let's be honest, this is what the league members want. Danny, figure it out. Nerd, tell your mama I said hi. But this year's fantasy football Stanley Cup champion will be the 49ers when they trounce the Browns. what's even better is that it will just piss so many people off if Joe wins it again. But it'll be great. Bring on the drama, folks.
You heard it here first. Do you think the Chargers have what it takes? Or that Joe will keep up his dominance? Give us your predictions below. I'd love to hear them. Thank you to the nerd. Thank you to the Canadian, both for taking time out of their days to join us on this episode, this two-part episode. But most importantly, thank you for joining us on this special episode of The Thing with No Name.